This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, Sean, this is, I suppose, our Christmas special for the weekend edition.
Well, that's a good way of putting it, yes.
Except I suspect that very few of the stories will actually relate to Christmas, because what we saw throughout the week this week was you attempting to link ordinary business stories to Christmas, and the link was often quite tenuous at times. So I hope we see more of that today.
Possibly.
Well, we're going to each nominate what we think is the biggest story of the week, which may or may not have a Christmas link, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, one that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and our favourite story. And every week, of course, we are joined by our adjudicator, our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang, who has the pretty kind of mighty task of deciding a winner between the two of us. And because this is technically our kind of, this will be the last weekend edition of the year, of the calendar year. Is it kind of winner takes all, Sean? Actually, no, cancel that. It will be if I win. If not, then we'll just add it up across the year.
Fair enough.
Good sportsmanship till the very end. Adam, good morning.
Good morning.
Now, there was a bit of a scandal involved in today's weekend edition.
Already?
Yes, which involved the theft of a story, but we'll come to that a little bit later on.
Hijack.
Yes, indeed. But Sean, would you like to go first with the biggest story of the week?
You are genuinely the most ungrateful person I have ever worked with, Michael.
How so? Grateful for you stealing my story.
Who gets first dibs at the stories every week? Who generously says, Michael, you take a look at what stories you want. And for the first time all year, I said, there's a crossover of stories here. Perhaps I should take that. You're making a big thing of it, Michael. This is not a good reflection on your character.
There are so many inaccuracies in what you've said, and I will deal with them all one by one later. Let's hear your biggest story.
Michael Thompson being a narc. That's the biggest story for mine.
Please go on.
Well, look, I mean, it is Christmas time. You're not supposed to be doing corporate deals. There's a bunch of M&A announcements around at the moment. The big one, of course, was BHP finally got Oz Minerals in a $9.6 billion deal that'll create a major copper and nickel player mostly around the Olympic Dam site in South Australia. There's also the ACCC, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, came out this week and blocked the network sharing agreement proposed by Telstra and number 3 player TPG. Basically, they said if the deal went ahead, Australian mobile users would be worse off over time in terms of price and regional coverage. What else? Private equity group Pacific Equity Partners pulled its offer to buy education and workforce software group ReadyTech Holdings. That one was worth about $500 million. Clive Palmer, Queensland businessman, former MP, he sold a nickel and cobalt refinery in Townsville to a Swiss consortium for $1.3 billion. Silk Laser ponied up $8.4 million for Eden Laser Clinics. That's a bunch of cosmetic clinics across New South Wales and the ACT. And even Kogan.com shelled out $1.5 million in cash to acquire a collapsed online furniture business. So, given it's the last week of the year, what an incredibly big week in M&A activity. Michael.
Yes, it certainly was. And I would like to take this opportunity to kind of recast myself, not as a narc, but as basically the physical embodiment of all that is Christmas. And I've generously gifted a story to you that I had chosen as my most remarkable, but instead you've worked it into a very Sean Aylmer-esque wrap of a whole bunch of stories and combining them into one. So
what's emerging from this show today is really what you and I think of each other. It's just been bubbling along all year. We get to Christmas. We missed out on our Christmas dinner this year because we were too busy. And it's normally that happens over, after a few drinks, we let rip into each other.
Yeah, the wheels catastrophically fall off. Yeah. We've chosen the right time to do it. This is really kind of like the family Christmas lunch, isn't it?
Yeah, very much.
Anyway, my biggest story of the week is the biggest story of the week. So, Adam, please take note. Very big week for Australia on the world stage, starting with, of course, China. We had Foreign Minister Penny Wong flying to Beijing for a face-to-face meeting with her counterpart Wang Yi. Now, this is huge. This is really, really big when you consider that for the last few years, not just have there not been any kind of visits, but Chinese ministers and officials haven't even been answering the phone when Australia calls. The talks had the public approval of Chinese President Xi Jinping, and they're even now being broadened to include trade ministers. And so with obviously the crippling tariffs and sanctions imposed on Australian exports in the last few years, this can only be good news. But as Penny Wong commented this week, the ice thaws, but slowly. It will take time. The other big news this week on the global stage for Australia was the announcement of Kevin Rudd as Australia's new ambassador to the US. Arguably, he's pretty well qualified for the job, having been Prime Minister twice as well as Foreign Minister and an absolute kind of nut for international diplomacy. He is going to have his work cut out for him. The global kind of security environment is pretty, I suppose you would say, fragile at the moment. The AUKUS deal is at the heart of it, and so he's going to have a pretty kind of key role in managing all of that. The other thing we need to consider is that Washington, D.C. will now be introduced to terms like fair shake of the sauce bottle and got a zip, which is my favourite way that he always used to end his interviews. And in his interviews, remember, he had that habit of always asking himself the question that he wanted to be asked.
The third person, yeah.
Yes, indeed. And so I'm just excited about the fact that now, with Kevin Rudd kind of taking a more public role once more, that we might get to see some of these things, and the good people of Washington, D.C. will get to experience them too. Adam.
I hope he heads down to the Washington Chinatown and tries out his Chinese as well, because he's very good at that.
Do you remember the blooper outtake?
Yes, that's exactly right. I've met Kevin Rudd a few times. The last time I met him, and he was in between prime ministerships, and I went and had a drink with him, actually, and I felt pretty important because he'd asked me to come and chat to him, and we chatted for 40 minutes and it was all good. And as we got up to leave, he shook my hand and said, "Well, thanks for coming, Shane." And I'm like, maybe I'm not that important.
Oh, that is glorious. Feel free, Adam, to put that into my story.
Yeah, please. Let's help the narc out.
I'm not a narc. That feels very uncharitable of you. Sean Grinch Aylmer. Come on, let's go, Adam.
We've started with the gloves off. Thank you both very much. So, M&A activity, including the inimitable Clive Palmer and Australia on the world stage, including, as I believe he now likes to be referred to as Dr. Kevin Rudd.
Yes, Dr. Rudd.
Going to the world stage. Sean wins on this one because these deals have actually happened. Money's transacted, business has been impacted. On the world stage, yeah, the ice is starting to thaw. We hope, but it hasn't happened yet. And Kevin Rudd, well, geez, I hope he represents us very well on the world stage in the biggest, most significant economy in the world. But it'll be one to watch.
All right, most remarkable. Shall I go first on this one, Sean?
Please do.
Okay, so on account of my story having been stolen about 3 minutes ago, so I had very little warning of this, I'm going to bend the rules slightly for my most remarkable story. Not exactly cheating, because Sean... Did I just call you Sean or Shane? Now
I answered to both, as it turns out.
I suddenly got very confused over what your name really was. You've set a precedent in kind of combining a whole stack of stories into one. So I'm combining just two into this one. So that should not count against me, Adam. Two remarkable stories this week, both involving big personalities in the United States. So that's the common kind of link between them.
What, they happen in the US?
And they're big people. They are big personalities, and they have a few things in common. Elon Musk is one of them. And every week he's obviously gifted us something new. He is really a fear and greed staple, isn't he? And this week he ran a poll on whether he should quit as CEO of Twitter. The people said yes, so he is going to step down, but first he said that he needs to find somebody foolish enough to take on the job. Now, more than 57% of people voted yes. It just makes you wonder how many of those were just Elon just clicking yes over and over and over again, because it kind of does feel a little bit like this is something that he's wanted for some time, because he never actually really wanted to buy the thing in the first place. And now that he's kind of running it hands-on every day and it's not going particularly well, you can kind of imagine that maybe he didn't want to be doing that either. He's going to stick around and look after a couple of divisions within Twitter, servers and software. And you really do feel for the poor programmers and the people within those divisions, because at the moment, Elon's attention is spread right across Twitter. Can you imagine 100% of Elon Musk focusing just on those two divisions? My second big personality, even as I say this, I'm like, oh God, this is such a tenuous kind of link, isn't it? But anyway, the second big personality, most remarkable personality and story developing this week is all about Donald Trump. So you see, they are kind of linked. A congressional committee has been obviously examining the attack on the US Capitol almost 2 years ago. And this week, that committee voted to recommend that the US Department of Justice pursue criminal charges against the former president for his role in that, essentially the failed insurrection. The Justice Department will make the final decision on whether or not to actually indict him, but like, his legal woes are deepening. He's got kind of the issues in New York against his companies. Now he's got this. He had the FBI raid on his Mar-a-Lago property earlier in the year over classified documents. The thing is, this could all actually work in his favor, because it does kind of feed into that narrative of everyone's against me. So who knows? We will see. And a special mention to Jack Smith, the special counsel in the Department of Justice, who's running the federal investigation into him, just because I think the name is just such a kind of a Washington name, and it feels like there should be a Netflix series made about him. So two big personalities, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, special mention to Jack Smith. Huge, remarkable week in the United States. Over to you, Sean.
My most remarkable story is all about David Jones. I mean, tea and scones may never be the same. Really? My grandmother, she will be incredibly upset that private equity, which she would absolutely have no idea what private equity was. She passed away in 1986. But I tell you what, going to DJs for tea and scones when we came down to Sydney, that's about as flash as it got for us. Anyway, Sydney-based private equity group Anchorage Capital Partners has bought the 184-year-old retailer. It's got 43 stores. What's really remarkable about this is just how much money the South African-based Woolworths did in the deal. They bought DJs for $2.1 billion, with a B, $2.1 billion in 2014. In just 7 years, they've managed to lose $2 billion, and they sold it for $100 billion. Remarkable. What a poor investment this has been. In fact, outside firms, the Burns Phillips of the world and that going bankrupt, it's very hard to remember someone buying a firm for 2.1 and selling it for 100 million or anything in that category of loss. So the other thing just was remarkable about this is that just before the deal went ahead, Teo Capital, which is the family office of TPG Telecom's founder, David Teo, he's a billionaire, they put a bid in. Incredibly, they lost out, so Anchorage got it. But an amazing corporate story this week could well have gone into the main story, but I was sort of saving it because it's so remarkable. And just the fact that Woolworths from South Africa lost $2 billion. Remarkable. Adamski.
Michael, I think you've got it on this one. Elon Musk getting a vote up on whether he should resign as CEO, and then the crowd says, yeah, you should go. But he then puts himself as going, but I'll stick around. I'll still run all the programming and I'll report to the CEO, but I'll still own it. And that'll be cool.
Can you imagine how well that's going to go?
Oh, my God. That is what is so remarkable for me. Donald Trump, geez, we'll see whether it actually happens. I think it should, but what a spectacle that will continue to be. The David Jones story, and Sean, isn't it just, I guess it typifies the challenge for what is physical retail, and that story you described from 2014 to now, 8 years later, destruction of value of $2 billion for David Jones. That is remarkable, but just this week, I think Michael wins.
I almost would have backed myself in on that one because I was very, very confident that Michael's story was a lot more remarkable than mine. But the arbitrary nature of your judging gave me a lot of hope.
It really just keeps us all on edge, doesn't it?
Yes.
Adam's judging is the cliffhanger for this show.
Look, I don't intend that as a gift, but please take it as one.
Oh, it is fantastic. All right, we will come back in a moment and find the sleeper story of the week. All right, we are looking for the sleeper story of the week in our Christmas-themed weekend edition. It's really not Christmas-themed at all. I think we've mentioned Christmas 3 times. A sleeper story, maybe one that's flying under the radar a little bit, or going to be a bigger story further down the track. It is currently 1-1. Sean, what's your sleeper story?
It's all about Christmas, Michael. It really is.
Oh, well played. Now, stand by for a completely un-Christmassy story and then just watch Sean try and just thread the two together.
That's right. What do you do at Christmas when you've eaten too much pudding? You're sitting on the couch, you flip on the TV, you go to your favourite streaming show.
Oh,
so, my sleeper story this week is all about the end of peak TV.
Just screams Christmas, doesn't it?
Next Christmas, it won't be the same. Essentially, the New York Times reported that the number of adult scripted shows have tumbled in the past 6 months. There's been some massive streaming successes. Squid Game, Stranger Things. I want each of you to tell me your favourite streaming show over the past 12 months. It's really been an incredible couple of years. However, that looks to have peaked. Why is it a sleeper story? Absolutely no reason whatsoever. I just liked the story. The fact that the economy and the need for media companies to cut costs has meant that they've got to pull back on streaming shows is a really, really significant thing. Now, yeah, I get it's not really a sleeper story. However, next Christmas, when you're had your pud, you're sitting there watching TV and you think, oh, there's nothing to stream. Sean was right. Shane was right 12 months ago. That's my contribution.
Adam, do you suspect that Sean has gotten into the Christmas sherry a little early?
Yes.
I think he's phoning it in.
It feels a little bit like that.
So what is your favourite streaming show, Michael, just out of interest?
Oh, Ted Lasso would probably be up there, definitely, as one of the top kind of 2 or 3. I mean, everything. Oh, do you mean things that are just created for the streamers, as in by the streamers for the streamers?
No. Basically, the best couple of TV shows. So, like, my favourite is White Lotus, and then the left field selection for me is a thing called Kudam, which was I think it's on SBS actually. It's Kudam 56, which is a German post-war Germany show, which is fantastic. But I want you both to be thinking about this during the show. So by the end of it, we know what your favourite and just the other one for people on Christmas Day having eaten their pud, just to look up.
Just if you actually hear that noise, you can hear it. That's actually the sound of Sean clutching at straws. You can just, it's a very faint sound, but it's the sound of him just searching for a victory in there. Look, my sleeper story, it's actually a very serious one. And last week, my sleeper story was all about the gender pay gap. Similar lines this week. And that was a new report that shows there are just 21 female chairs of top 200 companies. Doing a little bit of maths on the fly, which was not really my specialty. That's just over 10%. I think we'll be able to agree. I was surprised, very surprised by this because last month there was a new record for the number of female directors at the top 200 companies, 35.7%. So I was actually really quite shocked to hear then that the number of female chairs, was so low by comparison. But as I learned from you, Sean, that one of those reasons for the massive underrepresentation is that the chair tends to come from the ranks of former CEOs and that there aren't just enough female CEOs. So that pool is somewhat smaller. Positive steps, obviously, this week with female CEOs appointed at Cooper Energy and in an interim capacity at Newcrest. But still, I learned something this week, something that surprised me, and I guess that's why it's the sleeper story for me this week. And if we keep kind of talking about the problem, then keeps the attention on it, and hopefully it becomes less of a sleeper over time. But that's it. It's quite a serious entry for me this week here, Adam.
Okay, so Michael, incredibly worthy story, 21 female chairs of the ASX 200 companies, 35% of female directors. So obviously we have much work to do, and that has been a story for a number of years. And broadly, we've stalled across the country in terms of the gender pay gap too. So there's a huge sleeper story there. So I think on that basis, this one has to win on the gender pay gap. The end of peak TV, as in adult scripted shows have peaked, that is actually a massive story. And I agree with Sean. This is significant because we've seen the rise of the streamers and all these new services. Not all of them are likely to survive, right? And they have to cut back on costs as subscription levels hit critical mass and hit a peak. So I think it is a terrific sleeper story. But on this one, I think, Michael, you just win.
What I like about that adjudication is that you actually told Michael's story and my story much, much better than either Michael or I told it.
Speak for yourself. You waffled for 8.5 minutes on TV shows that you liked, then realised suddenly that you were supposed to be talking about a sleeper story.
It was never a sleeper story.
You could hear the handbrake going on and you just trying to spin that vehicle around to try and go, oh, crap, this is supposed to be a sleeper story. Let me try and kind of retrofit it into one.
You did go to uni in Bathurst, didn't you? You love the handbrake stories. What's your favourite story, Michael?
Oh, goodness me. Well, my favourite story this week is really actually not my favourite story. It's a story that kind of terrifies me. But Adam, I'd like to just paint a little picture for you. And just, if you could picture yourself, right? Here you are, Adam Lang, flying off to Hawaii for your pre-Christmas break. 1 minute you're sitting there enjoying your gluten-free meal option and the latest episode of Insiders that you downloaded onto your phone before you left. And then, next moment, you're in extreme turbulence and your head is hitting the roof. This is what happened, a week ago now to a Hawaiian Airlines flight. 11 people seriously injured.
Your head is hitting David Spears, more likely.
We had 36 people needing treatment, 20 taken to hospital. An official described it as an isolated and unusual event, which you would certainly hope that to be the case. We've talked obviously a lot about airlines this year. It's one of our favourite kind of topics to talk about. We like talking about planes, and we've talked about the return to domestic and international travel and the fact that everyone's flying again, and the fact that the airfares are sky high, that it is just ridiculously expensive to fly. You put all of that together, and if you needed another reason to holiday at home this Christmas, the risk of extreme turbulence and hitting your head on the roof of the plane while you're trying to watch Insiders, I think this is that reason. Sean, over to you.
It's a funny story to be in the favourite category, though, isn't it, really? If you like the least favourite, maybe.
Yeah, well...
Which is okay. I'm not complaining about that. I think, it can be either extreme.
Well, yeah, because you're not exactly the most comfortable flyer, are you, Sean? You don't.
No, I'm not. Adam, are you?
I'm pretty good.
Oh, he doesn't care if he ends up with David Spears on his face.
No, but as you can imagine, I read all of the safety material every time I fly.
Do you?
I imagine so.
Do you really?
Yes.
Do you watch the stewards doing their thing?
Every time.
And you don't just look down at the paper and pretend that you know it already?
No.
And then you smile at them as they're doing it because you feel like no one else is watching. I better smile.
I don't want to spook them out. I just pay attention.
You got quite the smile, lads. You got quite the smile.
Just who's that guy creepily staring?
That's right. God. With a sly grin.
Hang on, this fellow's enjoying this.
Oh, look, this show has deteriorated. I'm going to finish with a serious story as my favourite story because it really wraps up the whole year. This year, what's this year been about, Adam? Like in the big world of business, what's it been about? What's the main issue?
I would say you can't say post-COVID, but post-lockdown, I think, is breaking free of that amongst the Ukraine war and supply chain issues easing.
May I have a guess as well?
Yes,
Sean?
you might, because Adam's nowhere near what I was hoping you'd say.
It's only because you have asked me this question. I think every couple of weeks you put me on the spot on the weekday show, and you did it twice this week. And I'm assuming it's about coal and miners and coal miners and the remarkable turnaround of the coal companies.
Something like that. Yes. Well, energy has been the biggest story of the year, I would say. And both of you, Adam, you did when you talk about supply chains and Ukraine and that. Energy's been the big story. So my favourite story this week, and I'm going to put it up for the year, why not, is the mining stock in Indonesia, which has been the best performing investment all year, at least on major global bourses. It's up 1,600%. And yes, it's a coal stock. So shares of PT Adaro Minerals Indonesia jumped 1,600%, well ahead of number 2 in the 2,803 member Bloomberg World Index. Number 2, as it turns out, is Turkish Airlines. Why this company is doing so well is it's taking all that cash it's getting from incredibly high coal prices and throwing it into aluminium and battery making facilities for electric vehicles. It is taking the money and becoming a renewables play. And so all those investors out there are saying, yep, we're making lots of money out of coal. We can invest in that and we can do it without any regret, because what they're using the money for is to change themselves into a renewables miner, or at least a renewables operator. Is that not a cracking story to end 2022 on? My favourite story, easily.
Okay, so Sean wins on this one. I think, Sean, this Indonesian coal mining company transitioning to green energy using its own profits, it's like a microcosm of the global challenge, and they've been so rewarded for it. I think it's an awesome story. So you win on this one.
So I think we should go 2-2. I don't think we should go the scores. I think we should just leave. I mean, I know I'm saying this because Michael would never be able to finish this podcast without knowing the scores. And I'm quite happy to.
Well, okay, just a couple of two quick points. Number one, I enjoyed Adam's use of the word microcosm. Mm-hmm. And also, if we were going to the points, I would expect that because I contributed a little bit with my suggestion of coal companies and energy, et cetera, at the start of that I would deserve some of Sean's points as well. So, but look, I'm happy with the tie. Let's leave it at that. 2-2.
Let's leave it at a tie. It's a good way to finish the year.
It's kind of unsatisfying, isn't it?
Yeah. Who are you two?
You can't help yourself.
No. We don't need to know. Adam, cough once if it was me. Actually, don't cough at all. I don't want to know now because you did.
Well, that leaves an impossible task.
All right. So just hold on to your coughs. All right. So for the final weekend edition of 2022, we'll say that it is a very honourable draw, a tie between us, and with some excellent judging by you, Adam. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Shorter episodes for the next few weeks, but still a new episode of Fear and Greed every day. I'm Michael Thompson. Have a great weekend and a very Merry Christmas.